If you ever watch The X-Files or Supernatural, then you're already familiar with this story. You've seen it play out again and again. An investigator that wants the truth, a case no one else believes, and evidence that disappears just before anyone else can see it. But here's the part most people don't realize. That story didn't start in the 1990s, and it didn't start on a back road in Kansas either. It started out much earlier with a reporter who kept chasing stories that no one wanted to hear. And once you see the pattern, you can see it everywhere. I'm Rich from Rerun Zone, and today we're taking a closer look at where it all began. Once you start looking, Kolchak stops being just another short-lived series and starts to feel more like a blueprint. The structure is simple but reliable. You have one central figure, usually working alone, who stumbles onto something that doesn't quite fit the world as everyone else understands it. He follows the trail, piece by piece, while the people around him dismiss it, explain it away, or just refuse to see it. By the time the truth finally comes into focus, it's either too late or too inconvenient to acknowledge, and everything resets as if it never happened in the first place. That pattern might sound familiar because it's the same foundation that later shows would build entire franchises around. The difference is that Kolchak was doing it without a safety net. He didn't have an agency backing him up, no partner to validate what he was seeing, and no larger mythology to connect the dots from one case to the next. Each story stood on its own, and each time he had to start over again from nothing. That's where the connection to something like the X-Files becomes clear. Fox Mulder may have had a badge and access to government files, but at his core, he's chasing the same kind of truth, pushing against the same disbelief, and running into the same wall when the evidence slips away. Kolchak just did it first, and he did it with no support. Once you see that pattern, it's easier to understand why it kept showing up in later shows. It wasn't just the monsters or the mysteries. It was the structure of the story. One person sees something that doesn't add up, follows it anyway, and ends up alone with the truth. That idea proved to be flexible enough to fit different kinds of storytelling, and that's exactly what happened in the years that followed. In the X-Files, the same structure is expanded upon. The lone investigator becomes a pair, and for the first time, the believer isn't completely alone. Fox Mulder is still chasing things no one else wants to believe, but now he has someone standing beside him who questions everything. That tension between belief and skepticism becomes part of the story itself. It's something Kolchak never had. He didn't have a Scully to challenge him or back him up. When he was right by himself. The tension in Kolchak comes from his run-ins with law enforcement or butting heads with his editor, Tony Vincenzo. Not the same, but still very effective. In the later shows, the scale changes too. Instead of one case at a time that resets at the end, the X-Files begins to connect those cases into an ongoing mythology. Government secrets, hidden agendas, long-running conspiracies. The truth doesn't just disappear, it's being covered up. That gives the audience something to come back to week after week, something Kolchak never got to do. Then you look at a show like Supernatural, and the same foundation shows up again, just in a different form. Two brothers on the road, moving from town to town, chasing stories that most people would rather ignore. The monsters are more varied, sometimes more extreme, but the idea is familiar. Someone hears about something strange. They investigate, and they find out that it's real. The difference here is that the characters are fully inside that world. They expect the impossible. Kolchak never did. He kept walking into it like it was the first time, over and over again. And that's what really sets him apart. He wasn't part of a larger system. He didn't have a network of people who understood what he was dealing with. Every case started with doubt, not just from others, but from the situation itself. And every time he pushed forward anyway, even when it cost him his credibility, his girl, his job, or whatever chance he had of being taken seriously. When you line it all up, you can see how the idea evolved. Kolchak establishes the pattern. The X-Files builds on it and gives it continuity. Supernatural takes it further and turns it into a long-running world. But at the center of all of them is the same basic idea. Someone is willing to follow a story that no one else believes, and that decision comes with a cost. When you look at what came after Kolchak, it's easy to focus on what those shows added. Bigger stories, continuing plots, deeper mythology, and characters who weren't alone anymore. But what's just as important is what Kolchak never had. There was no larger plan, no hidden file somewhere that connected everything. No moment where someone in authority finally admitted that he was right. Every case stood on its own, and every time it ended, the world went right back to normal as if nothing had happened. That meant there was no safety net, no reassurance that the truth would eventually come out, no sense that things were building toward something bigger. If Kolchak found the answer, it didn't change anything past that moment. Later shows gave their characters something to hold on to. Mulder had a reason to keep going. The brothers in Supernatural had a world that made sense to them, even when it was dangerous. Kolchak didn't have that. He just had the next story. Each of Kolchak's cases could be the one that finally proves him right, or just another story that disappears like the rest of them. And that's probably why Kolchak the Night Stalker is still so beloved. Not because it built a larger universe, but because it didn't. It kept everything contained and it left more to the viewer's imagination. In the end, Kolchak wasn't trying to build a world. He wasn't uncovering a grand conspiracy or chasing a story that would finally connect everything together. He was just following one lead at a time, wherever it happened to go, even when it didn't lead anywhere anyone else could see. And maybe that's why the show still stands out. Because once you strip everything else away, all the mythology and the long-running storylines that came later, what you're left with is something very simple. One person looking at something that doesn't make sense and refusing to walk away from it. That idea never really changed with the later series. It was just expanded upon, repackaged, and passed to the next generation of shows. So when you watch The X-Files or Supernatural, and it feels familiar, it's not just because of the stories they're telling, it's because the foundation was already there. Kolchak the Night Stalker only lasted one season, but it left an indelible mark, and all of us who love the genre are better off for it. This is Rich from Rerun Zone. If you like this video, I also share some of my life reflections on my second channel, Rich After 70. I'll leave a link below if you'd like to check it out. And if you want a more in-depth look at Kolchak the series and why it was canceled, click this link over here. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good night.